This podcast contains explicit content and discussions related to real-life criminal activities, including violence and sensitive topics. Listener discretion is advised. The host's opinions are personal and are not representative of any individuals or organizations involved in the cases. We strive for accuracy, but if you've missed anything, please let us know. Thank you for listening. Welcome to Rotten Minds. I'm Kay. Imagine this. You're going on a dating show, seeking love and connection, only to unknowingly pick a contestant who lives a secret double life. A charming photographer by day and a serial killer at night. Today we're delving into the disturbing case of Rodney Alcala, now infamously known as the dating game killer. Concealing a sinister truth, Alcala appeared on a beloved TV show, all while secretly being a prolific serial killer. Join us today as we unravel how Alcala's charisma masked his true intentions, exposing the unsettling truth behind his facade of charm. Before we get into the case, here is a disclaimer. This episode includes discussions of sensitive topics such as murder and sexual assault, so please listen with caution. On September 5th, 1968, in Los Angeles, California, 8-year-old Tali Shapiro was walking to school when all of a sudden a car pulled up beside her. In the car was a man who asked her if she wanted a ride. Tali refused because her parents had told her to not talk to strangers. But the man was persistent and kept on following her in his car. Finally, he told her that he knew her parents. Tali paused. Well, if he knew her parents, he was not technically a stranger, so she decided to go with the man and got into his car. Well, you have to remember that this is the thought process of an innocent 8-year-old child, so you can't really blame her. After getting into his car, he said that they would have some time left before her school started and took her to his apartment, saying that he had a picture to show her. As the car drove off, a person had been watching the entire exchange. He felt that something was off and decided to follow the car. The car stopped in front of an apartment and the man saw a person get out of the car and force the little girl into the apartment. The man, very alarmed, immediately called the police. Police officer Chris Camacho was on his patrols when he received a call. The caller was a man named Donald Hines, who was none other than a good Samaritan and the witness who saw Tali getting into the car. The man informed the officer about what had happened. He described the car as beige and having no license plates. Immediately, Officer Chris set off towards the location, and as soon as he reached, he walked up to the door and knocked. No one answered the door, but the officer could hear noises coming from inside the apartment, and suddenly a man appeared at the window. Officer Chris in a later interview said that he would never forget the face of the man and described him as an evil-looking person. The man said that he had just showered and needed time to get dressed, but the officer knew that was a complete lie, because for a person who had just taken a shower, he seemed completely dry. Chris waited 10 seconds before kicking down the door. He walked into the kitchen first. There, he found a small body lying on the floor and a huge puddle of blood. It was Tali Shapiro. There was a steel bar kept on her neck which was pinning her down and she was not breathing. He began frantically searching for her attacker, but it was too late. The man had already escaped through the back door. As he walked back into the kitchen, he found Tali gagging and trying to breathe. The little girl was a fighter, all right. Barely holding on to life, Tali was rushed to the hospital. If it hadn't been for the officer's quick thinking, she would not have made it. Tali was raped and beaten with a steel bar, and with the same steel bar, she had been strangled. She was in a coma for 32 days and spent several months in recovery. As the officers searched the residence further, they found a lot of photographic equipment and a lot of photos. And these photos were of young girls. In the apartment, they also found an ID of the suspect, 25-year-old Rodney Alcala. He was a student at UCLA. With Alcala nowhere to be found, the authorities were grasping at thin air, desperate to find something about him. But everything was turning up empty, and there was no sign of Rodney anywhere. Also, because of a lack of forensic tools during the time, tracking down this guy was even harder. One of the detectives described Rodney as a snake charmer because when he had talked to one of his professors at UCLA, the professor said that he could not believe that Rodney would do something like that. The thing is, you can never really know someone as well as you think you do. In fact, this guy was so good at charming people that a lot of people believed that he wouldn't even hurt a fly. To get a better idea, let's go back to where it all began. Rodney Alcala was born in San Antonio, Texas, to a Mexican-American couple, Raul Alcala Bacur and Ana Maria Gutierrez. He was the third of 4 children. In 1951, Alcala's father moved the family to Mexico, then abandoned them 3 years later. In 1954, when Alcala was age 11, his mother moved him and his 2 sisters to suburban Los Angeles. Alcala was an academically gifted student who was reasonably popular among his peers and was supported by his family. He attended various private schools during his youth before graduating from Montebello High School. He was on the yearbook planning committee and was also on the track and cross-country team. In 1961, at the age of 17, Alcala joined the United States Army to become a paratrooper and served as a clerk. During his service, he was noted by his commanding officer as being manipulative, vindictive, and insubordinate. Alcala was disciplined on various occasions for assaulting young women. In 1964, after he suffered what was described as a nervous breakdown, during which he went AWOL and hitchhiked all the way from North Carolina to California, Alcala was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder and estimated to have an IQ of 135 by a military psychiatrist. He was subsequently discharged from the Army on medical grounds. Other diagnoses later proposed by various psychiatric experts at his trials included narcissistic personality disorder, bipolar personality disorder, malignant narcissism with psychopathy, and sexual sadism comorbidities. After leaving the army, Alcala graduated from UCLA School of Fine Arts and later studied film under Roman Polanski at New York University. Catching Rodney was proving to be a challenge. By 1969, the FBI had put Rodney on their most wanted list. Even then, there were no leads and everything was turning out to be a dead end. To evade the arrest warrant stemming from Shapiro's assault, Alcala left California and enrolled at NYU Film School using the name John Berger. None of his fellow classmates suspected that their popular classmate had a double life. In 1971, he obtained a counseling job at a New Hampshire arts and drama camp for girls using a slightly different alias, John Berger, B-U-R-G-E-R. Burger the food. During this time, Alcala began to work for the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, where he worked in an office with serial killer Richard Cottingham. Neither man has claimed to have been aware of the other, nor is there any evidence that they were familiar with each other prior to their respective arrests. Now, if you don't know who Richard Cottingham is, he is also an American serial killer and rapist who has murdered at least 18 women and girls. He's also called a torso killer. This is kind of crazy. Like, the fact that 2 serial killers met and they did not pick up on each other's dark secrets is kind of crazy. Also, what if they had? What if they joined teams, joined forces and decided to go on a duo killing spree? The possibilities are endless if they actually got to know about the other's secret lives. Not more than 3 years later, Rodney was back at it again, and this time in Manhattan. On June 12, 1971, Cornelia Crilley, a 23-year-old Trans World Airlines flight attendant, was found raped and murdered in her apartment. Alcala had strangled her with her own nylon stockings, leaving her for dead in her apartment at 427 East 83rd Street. It is believed that Crilley met Alcala as he moved into her new apartment and that she might have accepted his help in moving some furniture. With no leads and clues pointing to who her killer was, the case eventually went cold. The horrifying thing is that it would stay that way until it was solved in 2011, which is literally like 40 years after her murder. I can't even imagine what her loved ones might have felt like. And to be having killed and to not receive justice for like 40 years is crazy. Another thing to note is that Rodney Alcala was not even a suspect in the murder of Crilley during the time. While working at the camp, he did make a lasting impression on the campus. 2 girls had gone to their local post office, and while over there, they saw Rodney Alcala's photo on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. And they looked at each other and were like, "Hey, isn't that Mr. Berger?" The quick-thinking girls reported it to their dean, who then called the authorities. The authorities were able to arrest Rodney and then take him into custody. The police in California were eager to charge him for Tali Shapiro's brutal assault, but her family had left the country and they did not want their daughter testifying. Honestly speaking, that's just totally understandable. They just did not want to re-traumatize their kid. I mean, the family must have just wanted to put everything behind them and just get a fresh start for them and their daughter as much as they could. Unfortunately, this meant that without the testimony of Tali, the prosecutors couldn't charge him for rape. They had no choice but to make a deal with Rodney. The deal was that Alcala should plead guilty to a lesser charge of child molestation and register as a sex offender. Alcala took the deal, but the judge's sentence stunned everyone present in court. Alcala got 1 year to life imprisonment in prison with the possibility of parole. Can you believe it? The guy would be on the streets again. It is very evident that he's going to be a reoffender. He's not going to change. Such people should never be given parole at any point of time. They should just be given life in prison. And that is completely my opinion. Alcala was paroled in 1974 after 17 months. Less than 2 months after his release, he was rearrested for assaulting a 13-year-old girl, identified in court records as Julie J., who had accepted what she thought would be a right to school. Alcala was again paroled in 1976, again after serving 2 years. I mean, this is so evident again and again. This is proof that he is going to keep reoffending. He should never be given parole another time. Again, it's just setting a pattern. But I guess since nobody died yet, it isn't as severe. I just don't understand why they would do this. The parole board let him go out after serving for 34 months, even after what he did to the poor girl. Imagine releasing a monster back into the society after almost killing a child. And so less than 3 years later, Rodney Alcala was a free man again, and there was no real trouble for the charmer to charm his way back into the swing of things. He was back at it again before anyone could bat an eye. After Alcala's second release in 1977, his Los Angeles parole officer took the unusual step of permitting a repeat offender and known flight risk to travel to New York City. This is just crazy to me. Like, what? So he hasn't traumatized kids enough in one state, so they let him go over to another state and start traumatizing kids over there as well? Like, I just don't understand this. Why would anybody think this was a great idea? NYPD cold case investigators now believe that after a week from returning to Manhattan, Alcala killed Ellen Jane Hoover, 23-year-old daughter of nightclub owner Herman Hoover, and she was last seen at her New York apartment on July 15, 1977. Her datebook showed that she had an appointment to meet with one John Berger that same day. Later in 1977, a tip to the FBI was made about how Alcala had been arrested by the police a few years previously for the Shapiro case in New Hampshire. Alcala admitted to knowing Hoover under questioning, but investigators could not arrest him since they had not found her body yet. Her remains were eventually discovered, buried under heavy rocks on a hillside overlooking the Hudson River, near a location on the John D. Rockefeller estate, where an aspiring model would later report that Berger had taken photos of her. In 1978, Alcala worked briefly at the Los Angeles Times as a typesetter and was interviewed by the members of the Hillside Strangler Case Task Force as part of their investigation of known sex offenders. Although Alcala was ruled out as a strangler, he was arrested and served a brief sentence for marijuana possession. During this period, Alcala convinced hundreds of young men and women that he was a professional fashion photographer and took pictures of them for his quote-unquote portfolio. I mean, this guy was a registered sex offender and still no one knew about it. A Times co-worker later recalled that Alcala shared his photos with workmates. "I thought it was weird, but I was young. I did not know anything," she said. When I asked why he took the pictures, he said their moms asked him to. I remember the girls were naked. He said he was a professional, so in my mind, I was being a model for him, said a woman who allowed Alcala to photograph her in 1979. According to her, the portfolio also included spread after spread of naked teenage boys. Most of the photos were sexually explicit, and till today most of the subjects remain unidentified. Police fear that some of the subjects may be additional cold case victims. I guess no one will ever know. The thing is that even in order to identify these people, the photos, as compromising as these, cannot be revealed to the public in hopes of someone who would recognize the people, because the photos were downright creepy, disgusting, and also explicit. Another disturbing thing to note is that in 1978, Alcala was a contestant on the most popular game show called The Dating Game. Host Jim Longer introduced him as a successful photographer, and that between takes you might find him indulging in his hobbies such as skydiving or motorcycling. A fellow Bachelor contestant later described Alcala as a very strange guy with bizarre opinions. I mean, this guy is literally a serial killer and rapist, and the show couldn't even be bothered to do a background check on their contestants. How is this guy allowed to be on a show without proper background checks being performed? They could have definitely gotten background checks of his previous arrests and the case that at least found that there was an actual sex offender, right? He's on a dating game, for heck's sake, and he's on television. I feel like every TV show should definitely do background checks on their candidates or their guests before they get them on, at least for their sake, their publicity purposes. This is just super scary. I watched a video of the show where he's sitting and laughing and joking around with the bachelorette as if he had never killed anyone. This is just creepy to another level. Also, the show is so weird. The way that they turn every single sentence into something sexual was just hard to watch. It's just cringy and creepy. And can you guess who won the show? Well, you guessed it right. Rodney freaking creep Alcala won the competition, and also a date with the episode's bachelorette, Cheryl Bradshaw, who subsequently refused to go out with him because she found him creepy. That intuition is just spot on. Her life was saved because of her gut feeling, and I believe that all of us should just go with the gut feeling that we have. Sometimes that's the thing that possibly could save us. Not everyone is as lucky though. Criminal profiler Pat Brown, noting that Alcala had killed at least 3 women after his dating game appearance, speculated that this rejection could have been a motivating factor. One wonders what that did in his mind, Brown said. That is not something he would take too well. You see, psychopaths don't understand rejection and they would think that something is wrong with the girl. Most of the time, psychopaths are narcissists. They feel like everybody should bow down to them, that they deserve the world, and rejection is not something that they would take too well. So this is probably what he would have been thinking. Like, she played me, she played hard to get, yada yada yada. So it's like something that makes him want to kill more. I don't know. Maybe this becomes his motivating factor, his motive to get revenge just because of this one rejection. This has shown up in the case of other serial killers as well. People who have mommy issues, putting it on other women, killing predominantly females because they wanted to get back at their mother. It's all too common in psychopaths. Now let's get into the list of other people he murdered in California. And believe me when I say that this is just gonna get even more disturbing. On November 9th, 1977, Alcala murdered Jill Terry Barcombe, an 18-year-old girl from Oneida, New York, and disposed of her body on a dirt path near Mulholland Drive in Los Angeles. Barcombe was found in a knee-to-chest position and naked from the waist down. There were signs of sexual assault and that she had been strangled with a pair of blue rope ties and beaten. She also had 3 bite marks on her right breast. Originally, authorities thought that Barcombe had been a victim of the Hillside Strangler. However, her case was ultimately decided by the authorities to have been unrelated after the arrest of perpetrators Kenneth Bianchi and Angela Buono, who neither confessed to nor were ever convicted of the murder. On December 16, 1977, 27-year-old nurse Georgia Mary Wickstead was discovered dead in a Malibu apartment. She was last seen when she drove another nurse, Barbara Gale, home from a bar. When she did not show up for work the next day, Gale and her co-workers reported her missing. Police arrived at Wickstead's apartment to find signs of forced entry. Wixted was posed naked on her bedroom floor, strangled with her nylons. She had been sexually assaulted, her skull had been bashed in, and her private parts had been mutilated. This is just disturbing. This is so freaking disturbing to even say out loud. How can people be like this? I just don't understand. How can someone just be so crude and animalistic? I just don't understand. Prosecutors used DNA evidence and a handprint found at the scene to convict Alcala. On June 24, 1978, Charlotte Lee Lamb, a 31-year-old legal secretary from Santa Monica, was found dead in the laundry room of the apartment complex where she was living in El Segundo. She had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled with a shoelace and was posed with her hands behind her back. DNA at the scene would match that of Alcala, and DNA on a pair of earrings found in a storage locker after another victim's murder would eventually prove to match Lamb's DNA. On February 14, 1979, Alcala picked up 15-year-old hitchhiker Monique Hoyt in Riverside County. He drove Hoyt to his apartment and he raped her. They even traveled to a secluded mountainous area near Banning, California, where Alcala took photos of her in her underwear as well as pictures of him raping her once again. He then bound and gagged her and began a sustained assault which resulted in further rape and sodomy, then bludgeoned Hoyt in the head with a rock. Hoyt escaped when Alcala entered a gas station bathroom on the drive back to Riverside County, and she filed a police report about her ordeal, but Alcala's mother posted his bail. Why would she do that? Obviously, she wouldn't come to know why he's in there, and when he's brutally assaulted a kid, a 15-year-old kid, why would his own mother, a fellow woman, bail him out of prison so that he can do it again? I just don't understand. He should have just been left in there. And I think at this time, though crazy as it may seem, a mother's love for her son may be greater than seeing their right from wrong. On June 13, 1979, Jill Mary Parenteau, a 21-year-old computer key punch operator, left work early to go to a baseball game. When she did not make it to work the next morning, police went to her Burbank apartment and found signs of forced entry. Parenteau was dead, naked on her bathroom floor. She was posed with pillows under her shoulders, and she had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled. Her killer cut himself crawling through a window. Blood evidence would later identify Alcala as the perpetrator. Parenteau's friend, Catherine Bryant, testified that she and Parenteau had met Alcala at a club several times before. Robin Christine Samso, a 12-year-old girl from Huntington Beach, disappeared as she rode a bicycle from her Huntington Beach home to a ballet class on June 20, 1979. Her decomposing body was found 12 days later in the Los Angeles foothills, dumped off of Santa Anita Canyon Road. She had been beaten, raped, and stabbed with a knife. Samso's friends told police that a stranger had approached them on the beach, asking to take their pictures. Detectives circulated a sketch of the photographer, and Alcala's parole officer recognized him. During a search of Alcala's mother's house in Monterey Park, police found a rental receipt for a storage locker in Seattle. In the locker, they found Samso's earrings, as well as earring containing evidence of Lamb's DNA from a previous murder. And finally, Alcala was arrested in June 1979 and held without bail. He went on trial for Samso's murder and was found guilty in May 1980 and sentenced to death in June. However, the verdict was overturned by the California Supreme Court in 1984 because jurors had been improperly informed of his prior 6 crimes. Okay, so this is gonna get even crazier. Do you know that the entire trial, with so much evidence, right, it lasted for 30 long years, 30. Can you believe that? It's just crazy. I just can't understand. He himself documented his crimes, and they have actual physical evidence and DNA evidence pointing to his presence in the crime scenes and also in his possession. So I just don't understand. Maybe there's a lot of formalities, but why would it take 30 years? 30 years is a crazy amount of time. In May 1986, after a second trial which was virtually identical to the first one, but this time it included his prior criminal history, he was convicted again and sentenced to death in August. In 1992, the California Supreme Court upheld the verdict, but Alcala filed a federal habeas corpus petition, and in 2001, a United States District Court judge granted it, overturning Alcala's second conviction. That decision was upheld in 2003 by a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals panel, in part because a witness was not allowed to support Alcala's contention that the park ranger who found Samzo's body had been hypnotized by police investigators. This is just a wild... How is this even considered as a valid reason for withholding justice? I don't understand this. For a person with a 135 IQ, he was pretty much not very creative with his excuses. Well, this gets even more interesting because while preparing the third prosecution in 2003, Orange County investigators learned that Alcala's DNA, which was sampled under a new state law over his objections, matched semen left at the rape-murder crime scenes of 2 women in Los Angeles. Additional evidence, including another cold case DNA match in 2004, led to Alcala's indictment for the murders of 4 additional women: Jill Barcombe, 18, Georgia Wickstead, 27, Charlotte Lamb, 31, and Jill Parenteau, 21. All the people that he robbed of their lives are all very promising human beings, you know? All of them are so young. A lot of them are kids. I just don't understand. He's just naturally charming, and he was using that to his advantage to manipulate people and trick people into believing him. Which is also the case for Ted Bundy, right? He was very charming and he got away with his crimes, and no one would ever suspect that from an outward appearance. No one would ever think that this person is capable of such horrendous actions. It's probably not gonna cross anybody's mind unless they were told that this person did this. As mentioned before, another pair of earrings found in Alcala's Seattle storage locker had residue that matched Lamb's DNA. During his incarceration between the second and third trials, Alcala wrote and self-published a book called You the Jury, in which he claimed innocence in the Samzo case and suggested a different suspect. I mean, this guy was seriously trying out every way and any way to get out of this. I mean, what is the point? He's arguing for a particular case when he kills so many more. I don't know what he's trying to get out of. He also filed 2 lawsuits against the California penal system for a slip and fall incident and for refusing to provide him a low-fat diet. I just don't understand this either. He's so concerned about his health and his well-being, but he literally sodomized, abused, brutalized people and posed them in objectifying positions, even post-mortem, causing so much pain to the family and the surviving victims too. What is... I just don't understand. What goes through such people's minds? Another thing to note is that Alcala's lawyers tried, and I mean in capital letters, to get him out of being indicted for the other 4 murders by bringing up some BS excuses. Well, luckily for the general public and for the victims, the California Supreme Court ruled in the prosecution's favor. And in February 2010, Alcala stood trial on the 5 joint charges. So over here, side note is that I understand that people should get legal representation and it is innocent until proven guilty. But for criminals as heinous as this, I just don't understand. For lawyers who clearly know that their client is completely a deranged psychopath, what is the thing that goes through their mind that they want to get this person out on the street? I mean, is it all about the money then? If you have any opinions or thoughts on this, just leave us a comment. Let's discuss. Now, this case just keeps on getting wilder and wilder because for the third trial, Alcala elected to act as his own attorney. He took the stand in his own defense and for 5 hours played the roles of both interrogator and witness, asking himself questions and addressing himself as Mr. Alcala in a deeper than normal voice and then answering them. Really, they had to let this person put on a complete full-on drama show for them in a court setting. At this point, he's just making a fool out of everyone and he knows it, and it's almost like he's just trying to work up everyone in this case. During the self-questioning and self-answering session, he told jurors, often in a rambling monotone, that he was at Knott's Berry Farm applying for a job as a photographer at the time Samzo was kidnapped. He showed the jury a portion of his 1978 appearance on the dating game in an attempt to prove that the earrings found in his Seattle locker were his, not Samzo's. But one of the actors who competed against him on the show said that he would have noticed if Alcala was wearing earrings because it was not common for men to wear earrings. Alcala made no significant attempt to dispute the 4 added charges, other than to assert that he could not remember killing any of the women. That is even more adding insult to injury. As part of his closing argument, he played the Arlo Guthrie song, Alice's Restaurant, in which the protagonist tells his psychiatrist that he wants to kill. After less than 2 days of deliberation, the jury convicted him on all 5 counts of first-degree murder. Now remember the young, brave Tali Shapiro? Well, she was a surprise witness during the penalty phase of the trial. She was now an adult and had gathered, understandably, a lot of courage to come and testify against this creep of a man. Richard Rappaport, a psychiatrist paid by Alcala and the only defense witness, testified that borderline personality disorder could explain Alcala's claims that he had no memory of committing the murders. Again, is it all about the money over here, or is there no conscience? I just don't understand. But the prosecutor argued that Alcala was a sexual predator who knew exactly what he was doing was wrong and didn't bother to care. In March 2010, Alcala was sentenced to death for a 3rd time, and I mean, this is getting quite long, right? He's sentenced to death multiple times and he somehow wiggles his way out of it and then puts on a whole show again. He did not pay for his crimes as soon as he should have. After his 2010 conviction, New York authorities announced that they would no longer pursue Alcala because of his status as a convict awaiting execution. Nevertheless, in January 2011, a Manhattan grand jury indicted him for the murders of Prilly, the flight attendant, and also the murder of Hoover in 1971 and 1977 respectively. In June 2012, he was extradited to New York, where he initially entered not guilty pleas on both counts. I mean, this guy has a lot of nerve pleading not guilty even after stacks of his own documented evidence exists against him. In December 2012, he changed both pleas to guilty, citing a desire to return to California to pursue appeals of his death penalty conviction. Again, on January 17, 2013, a Manhattan judge sentenced Alcala to an additional 25 years to life because the death penalty had not been an option in New York State since 2007. The following are some of Alcala's other victims. Following Alcala's death in 2021, 68-year-old Morgan Rowan contacted Steve Hodel, one of the original investigators in the Shapiro case, and described being attacked by Alcala in July 1968, when she was 16. Rowan claimed that while she was living in Hollywood at the time, she was approached by Alcala at a teen nightclub on the Sunset Strip and entered his car believing he would drive to an IHOP restaurant. Instead, Alcala drove to his apartment a few blocks away, where he had said he was having a party. When they arrived, Alcala dragged Rowan into his bedroom, barred the door, and then beat and raped her. Rowan was rescued by friends who broke into the room through a window. Alcala fled and Rowan was pulled from the apartment by her friends. I feel like if her friends had not come at the right time, he would have probably killed her off. In March 2021, investigators in Marin County, California, north of San Francisco, announced that they were confident that Alcala was responsible for the October 9, 1977 murder of 19-year-old Pamela Jean Pam Lamson, who disappeared after making a trip to Fisherman's Wharf to meet a man who had offered to photograph her. Her battered naked body was subsequently found in Marin County near a hiking trail. With no fingerprints or usable DNA, charges were never filed. The police claimed that there was sufficient evidence to convince them that Alcala had committed the crime. In September 2016, Alcala was charged with the murder of 28-year-old Christine Ruth Thornton. Thornton and her lover moved away from her family to live in San Antonio, Texas. After they split up in Biloxi, Mississippi in June 1977, she was lost in hitchhiking and was never heard from again. In 2013, an image made public by Huntington Beach PD and NYPD of a dark-haired woman riding a motorcycle while wearing a yellow shirt was recognized by Thornton's sister. Her body was found in Sweetwater County, Wyoming, along Interstate 80 in 1982, but was not identified until 2016 when DNA supplied by Thornton's relatives matched tissue samples from her remains. Alcala admitted taking the photo, but not to killing the woman who was approximately 6 months pregnant at the time of her death. Thornton is the first alleged murder victim linked to the Alcala photos made public in 2010. But by then, Alcala, who was 73 years old at the time, was too ill to make a journey from California to Wyoming to stand trial for the newly added charges. Remember the photos taken by Alcala? Well, the police released some of those photos to the public in hopes that someone would recognize the people in the photos to understand if any of them were additional victims of Alcala. A total of 120 photos were released. The rest 900 could not be made public because they were too sexually explicit. In the first few years, police reported that approximately 21 women had come forward to identify themselves, and at least 6 families said that they believed that they recognized loved ones who had disappeared years ago and were never found. And that is just crazy. To not know what happened to your loved one for so many years, and then see them in a photo lineup potentially taken by a serial killer is not comforting, but maybe bring some closure to them. But it's never the same. They were photographed in the last moments, and that's the photos that the family members saw in order to get that closure. So I just can't imagine how that must feel. None of the photos were unequivocally connected to a missing person case or unsolved murder until 2013. 110 of the original photos remain posted online, and police continue to solicit the public steps with further identifications. On July 24, 2021, Rodney Alcala died of unspecified natural causes in Corcoran, California at the age of 77. It's totally unfair that this man got to live his life till the very end and not have somebody unjustly take it away from him, or in this case, justly take it away from him. The fact that he kills so many young, innocent people, like especially children, and even an unborn kid. The fact that he got away with so much and never really received any actual punishment for it is just mind-boggling. The fact that he was actually sentenced to death 3 different times, and every single time he kind of got away with it. I just don't know how that can even happen. I believe that he's burning in the deepest, darkest spots of hell right now. That's the only justice that we can ever find solace that he probably will be experiencing right now. I just can't imagine that somebody who is as crude, as violent, and horrific as this can just die and it would just end there. People's lives were taken away from them before they could even start living them. I don't know, this is just a very emotional part of the case, especially when something like this happens. A person who's killed so many people, and get that. Another crazy thing is that the people who are working the case still believe that there's more potential victims, and they have said that the actual number might be as high as 130, but no one will ever know, I guess. One of the investigators on the case said that Alcala was extremely cold and lacked remorse for whatever he did, and the police called Alcala a killing machine, and others even compared him to Ted Bundy. I mean, like I said, he was charismatic and he used that to his advantage, and he was pretty intelligent as well with a high IQ, 130 plus, right? So he's similar to Ted Bundy in those instances as well. And the fact that there could be potentially more victims whose families have never had closure and there was never justice brought down for them is just heartbreaking. And we can clearly understand that this person, this guy, had totally no remorse, because at the trial that he represented himself, he was putting on a full Shakespearean play. He was literally putting on a full-on show. No sympathy, no remorse for what he did, and whatever the heck he was doing in that court on that day would have affected the people in the audience, the surviving members of the victims' families. Imagine the mental cartwheels that he just put them through by just acting out his play in an actual courtroom. So let us know what you think about this, especially in regards to this case. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of opinions, a lot of thoughts, and a lot of things to talk about. What actually drives people to be this insane? And that brings us to the end of today's case. Please let us know what you think in the comments. And stay safe out there, and we'll see you in the next episode. Also, please support us by following our show on Spotify or wherever you're listening to, on Apple Podcasts or even on Amazon Music. And also support us by rating our show. It's an encouragement to us to see the numbers go up, that there are people resonating with us and interested in our work. If you have any case suggestions, let us know in the comments or in the Q&A section in Spotify. And until next time, goodbye. I'm Kay, and this was Rotten Minds.